Hello and welcome to In-Service 2025 Rapid Deployment to an Active Shooter. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with our training objectives. Following the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, North Carolina developed a response plan to address active attacker situations. All North Carolina law enforcement officers must be uniformly trained in the same technique to avoid any confusion during what will already be total chaos. Recent events show us that active attacker incidents across the country are, while tragic, still a reality. Most active attackers intend to kill as many people as possible. The traditional law enforcement response of surround and contain allows a suspect to fulfill whatever his intentions may be. Our duty as officers is to intervene as soon as possible when a homicide is being committed. If we are to save lives, we must initiate an immediate response. Officer presence will change the dynamics of the active attacker scenario. In 2023, FBI reported there was 48 active shooter incidents, which is a 4% decrease from 2022, which had 50 incidents. During these attacks, 2 law enforcement officers died and 12 were injured. 58% of these events occurred in open spaces, 29% in commerce, 6% in educational settings, and 4% in healthcare, and 2% in private residence. Rapid deployment was defined by the National Tactical Officers Association in 2018 as the immediate deployment of law enforcement resources to life-threatening situations where the delay in such deployment could result in death and/or great bodily harm to persons. The key components of this definition is immediate deployment to life-threatening situations. In other words, officers are not to surround and contain a suspect when a homicide is in progress. This means you must respond as a solo officer to stop the threat. An active attacker is someone who is actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined or populated area. In most cases, active attackers use firearms. There seems to be no distinct pattern to the selection of the victims. Most of these attackers had well-developed tactical plans, killing as many people as possible. Types of situations that may require an immediate response. There are 5 basic situations that may require an immediate deployment: active attacker in a school, active attacker in a business, active attacker in a place of worship, hostage rescue, injured officer, civilian rescue. It is important to remember, however, that current trends show most active attacker incidents occur in confined and populated areas, so meaning they can occur virtually anywhere. Law enforcement mindset, traditional response, surround and contain. The traditional law enforcement response of surround and contain is adequate for dealing with most crises. For example, if a suspect walks into a bank to commit robbery and is surprised by the police, the suspect may go back in the bank and take hostages. If hostages are taken, then some level of negotiations will succeed most of the time, as hostages are generally instrumental to having the suspect's demand for money. Non-traditional response. The active attacker mindset difference creates the need for a non-traditional law enforcement response. In this approach, officers responding to an active attacker go on the offensive to stop the attacker immediately, and as a result, the presence of the officers actively engaging the threat changes the dynamics of the active shooter scene. Saving lives is priority. If we surround and contain an ongoing murderer and a homicide scene, we allow the suspect to accomplish his intended goals. Active attacker mindset. Over half the reported attackers had a history of gun use. In nearly 2/3 of the incidents, the attackers got the gun or guns used in the attack from their own home or that of a relative. In some cases, the guns have been gifts to the attackers from their parents. Unfortunately, shooting terrified people crouched under an object takes no skill or courage. Over half the attackers developed their idea for the incident at least 2 weeks prior to the attack. And more than half the attackers had revenge as a motive. Remember, officer presence will change the dynamics of the encounter with an active attacker. The attacker's plan is disrupted, and now the attacker faces an armed officer. Priorities of a law enforcement response. Regarding active attacker situations, law enforcement priorities are twofold: stop the killing, then stop the dying. As you approach and enter the attack site, you should be looking and listening for some sort of stimulus or driving force. This is any actionable information that could lead you to the attacker's location and may include gunshots, screaming, blood trails, information from the evacuees, or fleeing civilians, to name a few. The initial assessment is critical. The first officer to arrive must quickly assess what is taking place. Remember, a rapid deployment response must be initiated immediately if it is confirmed an active shooter. Do not delay your response by waiting for backup. You may have to go in alone, depending on what you know about the current situation and when backup may arrive. A law enforcement officer should be planning their approach prior to arriving to an active attacker. When approaching the attack site, the officer should be careful to park on the side of the road or the grass so that the access routes are not blocked. Officers should also be sure to exit their vehicles from a safe distance and approach on foot, and if able, approach from a position that would be unexpected by the attacker. Again, the number one priority of the initiating police response is to isolate and neutralize the threat. Secondly, the injured must be located and evacuated. Once these two steps have been accomplished and manpower is available, you can complete the inner and outer perimeter searches and evacuate the rest of the building. Immediate priorities. Locate, isolate, stop the attacker, stop the killing. Once that's completed, treat and evacuate the injured, stop the dying. Stopping the dying should be conducted immediately after stopping all threats. At this point, officers are often tempted to continue clearing rooms until the entire building is cleared. This could prevent them from treating the critically wounded promptly. It is important to keep in mind that out of approximately 98% of active attacker events, there was only one perpetrator. Therefore, officers should ask themselves if they see or hear any additional evidence of active killing. If there is no additional evidence of active killing and the decision is made to transition to stop the dying, officers could find themselves dealing with a chaotic situation that could easily become unmanageable. During this phase, officers should consider operational priorities using the SIM concept. Security. This refers to establishing a small, secure area where the critically injured can obtain immediate treatment in a safe environment. This is also known as the Casualty Collection Point, CCP, which we will talk about in a later slide. Incident command. It is important to immediately establish incident command if not already done so by the first responding officer. Eventually, supervisors will arrive on scene to take over incident command. Medical. Eliminating preventable deaths is possible and should be the primary goal of law enforcement during the stop the dying phase. Officers may need to apply tourniquets, place victims in recovery position, or enlist others to assist in applying pressure. Still, the overall goal is to get the injured to emergency medical services professionals on the scene. Secondary priorities. Establish containment and inner and outer perimeters. This is important to the overall incident is controlled and contained and resources can be staged. And lastly, conduct a safety sweep for additional hazards. The rapid deployment response is broken down into specific roles which mirror the response priorities. Responding officers will form teams to fulfill these roles as response evolves. General considerations. Once the contact team has been dispatched, someone must coordinate the arrival and deployment of additional resources. The contact team officer or team should enter the building as close to the attacker's location as possible, and ultimately getting inside quickly and safely is what matters the most. Contact team. The contact team element is the first line of response. Multiple contact teams may be dispatched to locate the shooter in a large building. The three movement goals of the contact team are to locate the threat, isolate, confront, stop, or apprehend the attacker. Initially, the contact team will be the priority of all radio communications. Other responding units may need to be placed on other frequency or limit radio transmissions. Occasionally, radios may not work inside buildings, possibly hampering the flow of information. But remember, the priority is stopping the shooter, stop the killing. A contact team may consist of 4 or fewer members. Remember, the longer you wait, the more victims could grow and expose you to criminal liability. When rapid deployment was introduced to North Carolina law enforcement, they were trained to respond to an active shooter in the diamond formation. This formation is still used in the RTF, which we will cover later. The modified response method to active attacker is called the rolling T. Using the rolling T, the wing officers are already on point of the officer's flank as the team passes open doors, crosses hallway intersections, or challenges a suspect. Thus, they are already in position to take appropriate action. The rolling T is moving to contact. The contact team should not conduct room entries unless the suspect is located, or officers must deal with other priorities of work. If the team encounters a suspect in the hallway, the totality of the encounter will dictate the officer's actions and what is reasonable under the given circumstance. Officers should not move so fast they cannot process critical information and effectively understand the information they are receiving in the context of the situation. The point officer is responsible for long security, will direct the team's movement through intersections and around corners. The wing officers are responsible for open doors and closed doors or unsecured areas as they protect the point officer. Also, they are handling suspect or civilian contact while using the two officer cover and contact principles. When the two officer entry is made, it is performed by the wing officers. If the team encounters a suspect, the wing officers will move up on the line with the point. The rear guard provides rear security. The officer does not walk backwards but continually looks behind them as they make their movements. During the suspect contact, the rear guard is to find cover and continue to provide element of security. They are also responsible for communications. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with the following safe movement principles. The second most critical element of the response is the rescue team. A rescue team should be dispatched in the building as soon as injured subjects have been located. A rescue team consists of 4 law enforcement officers and move in the same manner as the contact team, with the primary objective to move injured into a safer place or evacuate them if the circumstances allow. Since the contact team may still be looking for the shooter, again, the rescue team will also move in a rolling T formation. Once they have located the injured, the wings will drop back behind the point position as if to place the entire team in diamond formation. The victim is positioned in the diamond formation center and provides 360-degree security. If they cannot walk, use the wings to carry them while the point and the rear guard provide protection. The rescue team goals are to locate injured, provide immediate treatment such as controlling excessive bleeding, triage or determine who needs to go right now, and evacuate if necessary. If a contact team or rescue team discovers a room full of injured subjects, it may be safer to escort several rescue personnel to this location and guard the entrances while the trained responders triage the injured. Rescue Task Forces, or RTFs, are teams consisting of fire, emergency medical services, personnel paired with law enforcement officers. Fire EMS personnel are tasked with the initial treatment and triage of patients in the warm zone. Law enforcement officers are assigned for protection for these teams and should not separate from the fire EMS personnel. Rescue Task Force is critical in the reduction of fatalities in these types of events. The quicker the response, the quicker the treatment can be provided to patients. The Rescue Task Force is comprised of law enforcement, EMS, and fire services. Collectively, the RTF provides patient care and patient movement. There may be times in which tasks overlap in which law enforcement, EMS, and fire are all involved in patient movement. Rescue Task Force is critical in the reduction of fatalities in these types of events. The quicker response, the quicker the treatment can be provided to the patients. The Rescue Task Force is comprised of law enforcement, EMS, and fire services. Collectively, the RTF provides patient care and patient movement. There may be times in which the tasks overlap in which law enforcement, EMS, and fire are all in patient movement. Rescue Task Force movement strategies. As mentioned in the previous slide, ASHER RTF is where law enforcement may escort a rescue task force to the injured for triage, treatment, and evacuation to a casualty collection point. ASHER Corridor is where law enforcement may establish a secure perimeter of a particular area so that the rescue task forces may move within the area for triage, treatment, and formulate a medical evacuation plan. ASHER CCP, or Casualty Collection Point, while transport is arriving, coordinate location of patients, and preparing patients for movement using litter and sleds from casualty collection point to transport system. And ASHER Immediate, law enforcement may start the evacuation of the injured from the area to a safer location such as a casualty collection point. Perimeter teams. They involve multiple officers and do not need to be formed until all necessary contact and rescue teams have been deployed. Once this has been met, consider the following. The inner perimeter. Officers on the inner perimeter are to go and establish rally points around a school, protect any fleeing students, and apprehend the suspect if the suspect tries to escape. The outer perimeter, our officers are to control traffic, cut off all roadway entrances to the school or building. An outer perimeter staging area should be activated off property to reduce the chaos at the crisis site. The goals of the perimeter team are to shrink the perimeter, provide a safe area for evacuation of the injured, cut off suspect escape routes, and allow the evacuation of a portion of the building. Evacuation teams. Evacuation teams should control the removal of innocent parties when the suspect or suspects are contained or eliminated. This will cause a large human resource drain. It is important to remember that an orderly evacuation will minimize trauma and always establish safe areas before evacuation. As mentioned earlier, a complete evacuation is not to be attempted until the known suspects are at least contained and a safety sweep has been conducted. As stated earlier, establishing command is extremely important. The command board, as seen on this slide, was created to help accomplish key tasks during these types of incidents. Once unified command has been established, the ranking supervisor will run the board for the incident commander. This allows the incident commander to focus on commanding the incident. By now, everyone should have received a copy of the Field Operation Guide created by the ASHER Task Force. This was created to provide each deputy with a quick reference during a critical incident. The role of the contact team is to find the shooter. When contact is established, the shooter will have the following options. Continue to shoot the innocent. The suspect or suspects may not see law enforcement presence. Even if they know the police are on site, they may continue to complete their original mission. Suicide, believing that there may be no escape, shame for their actions, or part of their bigger plan, active attackers may kill themselves before or during contact with law enforcement. Shoot at officers. The armed individuals may attempt to shoot at responding officers. Escape. The active attacker may attempt to escape by their shooting blindly at police or other students or civilians hoping to aid in their escape. Surrender. or they may attempt to take a hostage. While this is not typical, this could happen. It is important to remember that the only option the suspect must consider before the officer contact is to continue to shoot the innocent. Officer presence will force the suspect to consider the other options, which will save innocent lives. Officers have three options when encountering the shooter. Challenge from cover. If the shooting has stopped when the contact is made with the suspect, officers can challenge the suspect from behind cover if available. Arrest. If the suspect responds to the challenge and immediately drops their weapon, the contact team moves up and handcuffs the suspect. In the event of a solo officer responding and is performing the arrest alone, they should wait for additional resources to respond, remain vigilant, and keep the suspect at gunpoint. And lastly, deadly force. Civilian contact. If the contact team runs into fleeing civilians, if needed, gather intelligence and direct them to the nearest exit. Do not get tied up with extensive search and interrogation. Remember, the goal is to stop the shooting. If injured subjects are found, notify dispatch. Do not stop moving while shots are being fired. Communications. Communication is critical to this response. The rear guard and formation should handle all communication. All critical intelligence must be relayed. Once a contact team has been deployed, keep all radio traffic off the channel. Remember LCAN. Location, condition, actions, and needs. Officers should immediately report any information that can be used in the LCAN format to dispatch and other responders. The format is national. The LCAN report should be given upon initial arrival and update the situation's change. Once the contact team enters the building, they will continue to move until the threat is located. If shots are no longer being heard, move to the last known location where the last shots were fired. If initial sweep does not locate or flush out the suspect, use the contact teams to conduct searches of unsecured common areas such as bathrooms, locker rooms, storage rooms, etc. Use contact teams for static search, evacuate injured, and with rescue teams, shrink the perimeter around the area of the last sighting and sounds of gunfire. If gunfire starts, direct the contact teams to that location. If room entries need to be made during static searching, a 2-officer entry should be utilized. Remember, this is done by the wings. More detail will be covered during the practical part of this instruction. A 4-man entry may be needed for larger rooms or other unknown factors. Stairways. Unfortunately, law enforcement officers will likely encounter stairwells when responding to active attackers. If an officer were to get into a firefight while ascending a stairwell, there would be little to no cover or concealment options. Additionally, the attacker could have the tactical advantage if they occupy the high ground. Although there are several methods to negotiate stairwells when forming a contact team, it is essential that contact teams keep things as simple as possible. When negotiating stairwells, consider the following. Before starting up the stairwell, the point is to glance and listen for any threats directly above the team. Teams move at deliberate speed, quickly and quietly, being careful not to stop until they have reached the next floor. Stairs are not a place to stop, move slowly, or discuss tactical plans. If the contact team encounters a deadly threat while on the stairwell, all officers who can must engage the threat. In closing, remember, law enforcement's #1 priority is to stop the threat of the attacker. If we are to save lives, we must initiate an immediate response. Officer presence will change the dynamics of the active attacker scenario.